Live? Okay, fine. Good day to one and all. This is Dr. Sivaram of iknowindices.com. So the market is anxiously waiting for the US GDP data release by 12:30 GMT. We are now at 11:30 GMT. So the market is showing some dips in the case of GBP, and Euro is holding in a very narrow range. So let us see how exactly the market is behaving now and what sort of trade calls we can just envisage out of that. So today we are on 28th of October, Friday, and it is a weekend. So the players are expected to make very volatile moves for weekend in order to trap both the long as well as the short sellers. So between 11:30 and 12 GMT, I'll give the pre-US GDP data release the trade calls. And the trade calls will have the three components, namely the algorithm-based forecast, then the market reading, and also the trading strategy. Then I'll come back by 13 GMT and take about 15 minutes or so and try to review the results of the trade calls given during this particular time frame. And also I will try to explain what the market has done after that of the US GDP data. Mostly when a fundamental data is being released, many of the analysts will be looking for whether the fundamental data is going to be positive or negative to a particular currency. Since it is US GDP data, so obviously it has to influence US dollar to either become strengthened or weakened. And thereby you will come across the other majors are expected to make a strong or a weak move. Now, if we look into that of the live market, you find that Euro is showing positive net change, whereas GBP is showing negative net change, a contrarian move. Euro is showing positive net change, at USD is also showing positive net change, is another contrarian move. Then Euro is showing positive net change, and the CHF is also showing positive net change, indicating that Euro CHF they are just trying to gain. So it's again a contrarian move. And when Euro is showing US dollar weakening move, US GBP is showing USD weakening move, USD strengthening move, and also Australian dollar is also showing the USD strengthening move or a negative net change. So you find the players are currently making the contrarian moves in the market, indicating the expected volume is very low. As a result, they are expected to make whips or moves in the market, a quick upward stop and followed by a quick downward stop, and then they will end the day. This is what envisaged. Now coming to the top of the forecast part of it, which I have given it during that of the Asian session live market analysis. Today they are expected to make the swing and slide during that of the Japanese session, and then European session they are expected to make the swing and rise. So after that of the US GDP data, they are expected to make some rise, and then again during that of the US session, they are expected to make a swing and slide move, and towards close they are expected to make a nominal form of move. This is what envisaged by the forecast. So I explained it here. Euro and GBP are expected to make false dip before 12:30 GMT and swing and rise after the data release up to 13 GMT and make either way moves during the US session. That is a small form of move followed by the slide, and towards close for the weekend they are expected to make a small form of move. This is what envisaged the case of Euro and GBP. So accordingly, you'll come across some contrarian move as well in the case of USDN. Now we will do the market reading with the help of the initial lows and the highs, what I have noted down around 3:30 GMT, which I showed it during that of the Asian session live market analysis. Euro formed the initial low 1.0893 and the high was 1.0911. As I explained that they made an upward stop at 1.0925, they went up by 14 pips and come down a little bit and holding around 1.0919 above that of the initial high. And they are expected to make the slide later on by around 12:30 GMT before that of the data release and then start gaining the level. In the case of GBP, the initial low was 1.2153. They just breached the initial low, came down and formed the new low 1.2125. Then subsequently they just breached that by another 10 pips and come above that of 1.2125 and holding there. It is an extended downward move in order to gain the level after that of the US GDP data release. So when you look into that, it indicates that the players are expected to make the gaining move in the case of Euro and GBP after that of the US GDP data release. But when traders think that Euro and GBP could gain more because of that fundamental, probably the players might make the slide move and say that the people are lightening their position before that of the US elections. Then in the case of USD yen, 105.06 was the initial low that has not been breached, and 105.32 was the initial high. They just breached and went up to 105.42 and came down to 105.3233, holding above that of the initial high in order to gain some levels. Then afterwards, they will just make a drop to induce the traders to liquidate the long positions. Then in the case of USD CHF, 99.29 is the initial low. They just breached it and came down to 99.23 and come above that of the 99.29. 99.41 was the initial high. They just went up to 99.50 and come down. So it indicates that either way stop and briefly they had done it in a matter of about 25 to 30 pips. Then in the case of Canadian dollar, 1.3375 was the initial low, 1.3397 was the initial high. They went above that to 1.3399 and come down. So again, they are expected to make a brief upward as well as the downward stop. In the case of Australian dollar, 0.7581 was the initial low. They came down to 7565. Another about 14 pips, and then come above that of the initial low, but still holding below that of the initial low, 75.81, indicating that they want to just hold and later on come up, and probably they will make a brief downward stop and then go up. And the high was 0.7608, and that is not being breached. So overall, you come across that in the case of Euro, they are just holding above that of the initial high. In the case of Yen also, they are holding above that of the initial high, indicating they wanted to gain from there. And in the case of GBP, they are holding below that of the initial low in order to make a brief downward stop and then start gaining the level. And in the case of CHF, Canadian dollar, they intend to make only the upward and the downward stop, and either way above that of the initial high and below that of the initial low. Australian dollar, again, they are holding below that of the initial low, and they intend to make a gain move after that of the US GDP and then slide during that of the US session. So in all, you come across that mixed moves could be seen in the market. Now, let us see the trade calls. So in the case of Euro, there could be two possible buy levels, 1.0908, and they could come down a little bit and then go up initially to 1.0940 level, breach the initial high and the new high and come down. So we can book profit. Otherwise, they could make further downward move after during that gap time at the start of the US session. At the time, you can take a buy and keep the hedge order below that. And then later on towards close, they are expected to gain the level. At that time, you can book profit. So both the trading opportunities prevail. In the case of GBP again, we can either buy at 1.2125 soon after the before that of the GDP data release, and then quickly when they gain, we can book profit, and afterwards we can take a sell, and then they are expected to go down below that of the initial low and the new low, and probably reach 1.2070 area, and from there they will gain again towards close of the year session. So that way you can do either way trades. In the case of Australian dollar, they could breach that new low 75.60 by another 5 pips or so, and around 75.60 we can take a buy, and then they are expected to gain the level by close of the European session. We can book profit. In the case of yen, we can sell around 105.60 when they make an upward stop, and then they are expected to make a downward push below that of 105. At the time we can book profit. So these are all the trade calls I envisage, and you can try it in a demo trading platform. So if you've got any doubt, you can ask me the questions here in the question answer window. I'll be willing to answer to those questions. So these are all the trade calls I have given it here. And also the market is expected to make a swing and rise soon after that of the dip before that of the GDP data released by 12:30 GMT, and then start gaining the level after that of the US GDP data. I do not want to comment upon the GDP data, and it could give the trigger for the market to go up, Euro and GBP to go up, and then don't think that they are going to gain more level, but silently they will make the slide during the US session again and firm up towards close. That sort of moves, either way stop and moves, could be seen in the market. So aim for only swing trades. There is any question, kindly ask me. I'll be willing to answer the questions. So these are all the trade calls. Okay, when no question is coming forward, then I'll come back by 13 GMT and try to review the calls, what I have given it, and also I'll monitor the market during the GDP data release and give an interpretation or a comment about the market moves during the post US GDP data release webinar. So I take this opportunity to thank FX Street for giving me opportunity to give the pre-GDP data release call, and I'll come back for the post-GDP data review of the calls, what I have given it. Until then, you try to watch the market, understand how the players are making the moves in the market, so that you'll be able to really understand it is a man-made market, and we can understand their manipulations. Accordingly, we can plan our trades. See you again by 13 GMT. All the best.